I've recently set up some small glass terrariums to house some juveniles that I'm planning to grow out. I want to run individual compact UV globes for each enclosure, which means that I'll be needing 4 new light fittings. The dome-shaped ones are usually either not tall enough for the globes, or they're just too bulky and make the UV and heat sources placed too far apart. The hood style fixtures look nice, but they're still a bit too bulky, and they also cost around $100 each, so it'll cost me around $400 just for UV light fittings for this project. I've decided that what I need is a compact UV fixture that is only as big as it needs to be, that it can redirect light downwards efficiently, it's durable, looks good, and cheap. I do have to confess that even though the light only cost me around $20 to build, I did use power tools and machines that add up to more than thousands of dollars to get me there. So this isn't going to be much of a step-by-step tutorial kind of video, but just a documentation of the steps that I usually go through when tackling a project. Here's my initial train of thought. I've decided that I'm going to go for a sleek look with a glossy surface and curved contours, nothing too square and blocky. The first material I thought of is acrylic, since it can be easily bent and easy to work with. But then I thought acrylic might start deforming from the heat produced by the light. So instead, I'm going for aluminium composite panels. They are usually rated for outdoor applications, so they are UV and weather resistant, and the 2 layers of aluminium will prevent any bowing and sagging from the heat. I also want to avoid using any wood in this build, as wooden parts tend to be bulky. On top of that, unless I seal it properly, it might start getting affected by water and humidity from the enclosures below. So the aim of this build is to use nothing but aluminium and plastics. The first thing I did was to measure the dimensions of the largest light globe that I foresee myself using. For me, it is the 26-watt Arcadia UV globes. I added a couple of centimeters for clearance and for my fingers to go around the globe, and that will be the height and the width of the fitting. Now that I have those measurements, I went ahead to create a mold which will allow me to bend my composite panels around it consistently in the same manner. This involved me cutting a bunch of MDF rectangles to the height and the width I measured out. I rounded the corners to the same radius using a template on my router table, then secured all the pieces to the MDF base. After that, I cut a sheet of aluminium composite panel to size. It will need to be wide enough to bend around and cover all 3 sides of the fitting, and long enough to accommodate however many globes I need in my fitting. For this particular project, I only need them to be long enough for 1 globe plus the size of the ceramic fitting. But if I ever make a fitting for a larger enclosure, I may make it long enough for multiple light globes. Aluminium composite panels don't bend as easily as acrylic sheets, so I need to bend it using a technique called curve bending. This involves me lowering the height of the table saw blade to slightly less than the thickness of the panel, and then make multiple straight cuts over where the bend would need to take place. The thickness of the blade will remove enough material to allow the bend to happen. To increase the amount of UV actually going down to the enclosure, a good reflector is really important. For that, I'm using reflective mylar films that people use in hydroponic systems. It's more or less the same stuff found in the T5 fittings by brands like Zoomed and Arcadia. To attach the reflective film, I'm using PET temperature-resistant double-sided tape. These are rated for long-term use in 150 degrees, so I don't have to worry about the heat affecting it at all. Once the aluminium composite panel is bent, and the reflective film is attached, the main body of the light fitting is done. And for the end caps, it was designed on SketchUp, a 3D modeling software, and 3D printed in ABS plastic. I'm using ABS plastic because it's the most temperature resistant plastic out of all the commonly used 3D printed filaments. The only thing left to do is the electrical component. In order to attach a ceramic light socket to the end of the light fitting, I'll need a material that I can screw into. My 3D printed parts are not designed to accommodate screws or bolts, so I made some polycarbonate pieces that are sanded down to just the right fit that it will sit snugly within the light fitting. The ceramic light socket can be screwed onto the polycarbonate sheet. Before putting all the electrical components together, I drilled a hole at the back of the light fitting, added a nylon cable gland, and threaded the electrical cable into the fitting. The cable goes into the ceramic socket, the socket goes onto the polycarbonate sheet, and the polycarbonate sheet goes into the light fitting. The light fitting is now 100% functional. All the parts are held together by friction only, but I'm planning to add some epoxy or construction adhesive to where the parts meet when I get the time to. As a final touch, I thought it would be pretty cool to do a laser engrave on the front of the fittings. Aesthetics is one of the main focus of this project, and this definitely adds to the professional and sleek look that I set out to achieve. I'm really impressed with the end result. I used a few new materials and techniques in this build, but they still came out exactly the way I envisioned them to be. Not only do they look good, they're taking up less space on the top of these enclosures than most of the other commercial light fittings, and they really do make a difference projecting extra UV light downward.